Hello, good evening. Thank you for having me here this evening to talk about the events in Bahrain as part of the Arab Spring. Our uprising sprang into life on 14th February 2011, but like other countries in the Arab Spring, our movements has been calling for democratic change for many years before. The struggle for democracy in Bahrain has been continuous since the 1950s. And we even had a movement as far back as the 1920s. The picture here shows the protest movement and its leader in 1950s. You can see it. Alongside all of our struggles, we have been met with the same stubborn resistance from the regime: killing, torture, repression, arrest, and all other barbaric forms of treatment. I think it is important to touch quickly on some of the historical abuses committed by the Bahraini regime in order to understand the anger that led to the events on 14th February 2011, which we call it in Bahrain either 14th Feb or the pair movements, we call it sometimes. I want to provide you with the case of a young man in his 20s. His name is Jamil Mohsen Al-Ali, at the beginning of May 1980s. Jamil was arrested after a peaceful protest in Manama. Manama is the capital of Bahrain. On 10th of May, he was pronounced dead. Photographs from the mortuary showed evidence of cigarettes burns, iron burns, severe beating, and most horrifically drilling. Jamil had been tortured in the most severe of manners. The photograph shows the injuries sustained to his lower legs as a result of drilling. Other photographs are too graphic to show here. In the next 5 years, 5 people were tortured to death that we know of. During the uprising of 1990s, we call it dignity movements in Bahrain, further 10 people were tortured to death, adding to the more than 50 killed in total during these 7 years of revolt. When I say these figures, it is the whole Bahrain at that time was about 300,000 citizens. It's also important to mention here that the mastermind behind this policy was a certain British man by the name of Ian Henderson. Maybe some of you know him. Henderson was employed as the head of Bahraini security services for around 30 years until 1998. In this time, he came to know as the Butcher of Bahrain. Not only did torture happen whilst he was in power, it happened with his constant knowledge and at his request. Many activists and political dissidents have claimed that he personally came into torture chambers whilst they were being tortured. The following is footage from the ITM reports where activists describe their torture under Henderson.
Malik and suspend me of a chair. I start beating me with metal bar in my leg, in my body, in my face.
They hang me on a stake, wooden stake. And during that time I was being beaten very badly on my legs with rubber hoses. Sometimes by one guard, sometimes by two at the same time.
Mr. Henderson, when he came in the room, that side he's talking behind of me, and I was in chicken position. They hang all your bodies, and all the pain is becoming your head and your hand and your leg. And he put his finger in my ass, and he said, still he's not talking. Really, very bad.
Those are activists. Still, some of them, they are living in UK until now. And some of them, they are in Bahrain, but still they are political activists. In 1997, the European Parliament based a resolution calling on the British government to order his removal from Bahrain. Despite the allegations, he has never faced trial for his crimes, having benefited from the amnesty in 2002 by the King of Bahrain that granted immunity to all volunteers of human rights before 2001. After the promise of reform and changes to the constitution, we had hoped that the days of torture and repression were behind us. But the state reaction to the protest of 14 February 2011 sadly proved our hopes to be wrong. More than 90 have now been killed since 19 months of ongoing protest, including 6 from torture. That's what was documented in PK reports. My friend, he's one of my close friends and colleague, his name is Karim Fakhrawi, visited a police station on 5th April 2011 to complain that police were threatening to demolish his home. He was arrested that day and released 1 week later, dead. If you don't want to see his better body after this death, please look away now. Click. The police claimed, click please. The police claimed he had died for kidney failure, but during the process and torture marks were noticed, he was tortured to death. His case is mentioned in the inquiry that was commissioned by the King, the Bahrain Independence Commission of Inquiry, in which Essex very own Sir Nigel Rodley sat as a commissioner. Chapter 6, paragraph 1003. This is from the Bahrain Independent Commission of Inquiry. Commission investigators also received a number of verbal and written statements from persons alleging that they had witnessed the deceased being tortured in detention. In these statements, the witnesses claimed that they had heard him screaming, Allahu Akbar, God is great, after every blow he received, and that all of a sudden he stopped. The witnesses stated that after he decided to stop screaming, they heard one person say to another, you killed him. It goes on to say. Click. The Commission concludes that the death of Mr. Fakhrawi is attributed to torture while in the custody of NSA. This is for the National Guard of Bahrain. And yet, this wasn't an isolated incident, nor was it one of paragraph 1238, which is from the report itself. On the basis of Commission's investigations, and particularly the forensics medical reports, it finds that the NSA and MOI, Minister of Interiors, followed a systematic practice of physical and physiological mistreatments, which it may cases amounted to torture with respect to a large number of detainees in their custody. Next. 11 months ago, the King of Bahrain stood before the world and said he accepted in full this inquiry and will implement its recommendations. It was on 23rd of November last year. But this hasn't happened. On January 11th this year, 23 years old Yusuf Mouali left home and went for a walk. His body was found floating on water 2 days later, not far from his home. Hours after he went missing, his family were told he had been detained and was in custody. How could he have gone from police custody to lying dead in water? Yusuf's father was brought to the mortuary and told he had to sign a death certificate to say he had died from drowning. He refused until he had seen the body. After pressure from international organizations, which is Amnesty and other organizations, his body was released and an independent autopsy was carried out. The doctor's report read. I mean, it's long paragraphs, but still, you can look at it. You can give like a minute to read it fast. So basically, they took him to the private lands, private islands. They call it Amwaj, which is nobody can go even swimming to that island. Personally, I was here with the manager of that island at that time in January. I told him there is a body in the island. He said, no way, because I never been informed by the security. I said, please make a phone call. Just make sure what's happening. And he made that phone call and they said, yes, there was some police car. They went with we didn't know, with the body or something like that. Then it was discovered by one of the foreigners. They're living there in the island, in Amwaj Island. Okay. So despite the claims of the king that torture in Bahrain had ended, it is clearly still happening. What's more than excessive force, referred to by the BICI, is an ongoing process. On a daily and nightly basis, peaceful demonstrations are met with the tear gas, bullets, repression, and brutality. This is a regime that is desperate to maintain its region of dictatorship and refuses to give any kind of power to the people. Our demands are simple and fair. We call for an elected government, independent judiciary, fair elections, fair distribution of public land, and end of state discriminations in all public sectors. We want democratic rule like other places in the world, and yet the international community refuses to give us the attention or space we deserve. Since 14 February 2011, 90 innocent democracy seekers have been killed. 4,000 workers sacked from their jobs, 1,500 arbitrarily arrested, 1866 documents, cases of torture, ill treatment, and I would say 38 mosques destroyed. I never heard from any other countries now the regime destroying the mosques during this uprising, apart from Bahrain. The past 19 months has torn our country in apart, yet still we stand strong and refuse to back down in the face of great dictatorship. I call on you to support us and to stand with us. The more pressure applied on the British government to call for change, the better our chances are. The support of people like you is vital to our victory. Thank you for listening and looking forward to answering any questions you may have. Thank you.
I'm